Good evening, and welcome to Spooky Month at Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, the marvelous Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour over 4 years ago to just help us all stay connected, like we're in a little spider web, together, stuck forever. And he let me come in out of turn to host tonight to usher in Spooky Month because I'm the resident host. So welcome back to those of you returning, and welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. As always, we have two fantastic writers reading from their own work. Tonight's readers are Somto Ihezue and Lindz McLeod. If you are here on Zoom, please feel free to join in on the chat. If you are on Facebook, you can also feel free to join in on the chat. If no one answers you, it's nothing personal. We're just not hanging out there right. We'll get back to you afterwards. I promise we will. So our first reader tonight is Lindz McLeod, calling to us from the very dark hours of the night in Scotland. Lindz McLeod is a queer working-class Scottish writer and poet who dabbles in the surreal. I personally think she seems really comfortable with the surreal, but you know, she can be modest if she Her short prose has been published by Apex, Catapult, Pseudopod, and many more. Her longer work includes award-winning short story collection Turducken from Spaceboy in 2023, as well as her books Sunbathers from Hedon Books. That's the one I didn't check. Is it Hedon?
Hedon or Hedon?
Hedon. I was thinking like hedonist, but maybe say hedonist. Hedon Books in 2024. The Unlikely Pursuit of Mary Bennett, Harlequin 2025, pre-ordered. We, the Drowning, Android Press 2026. And the collaborative anthology, An Honor and a Privilege from Stanchion in 2025, which also includes one Somto Ihezue, who you're going to be hearing more about and from later. Her work has been taught in schools, universities, and turned into an avant-garde opera. She is a full member of SIFWA, the club president of the Edinburgh Writers Club, and is currently studying for a PhD in creative writing. Welcome back, Lindz McLeod. It is wonderful to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be back again, despite the very late hour. There's very little that could keep me up till 3 a.m. in Scotland, but Story Hour is one of those things.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so wonderful to have you and your books reaching out to us from the darkness and across the miles. Are there any content warnings our more sensitive listeners might need to know about?
Yeah, so tonight I plan to read two stories. There is murder and mayhem to varying degrees in both. But that is probably the only content warning required.
Okay. I would expect nothing less from you. Well, please.
Thank you very much.
Read whenever you're ready.
So I thought I would do, to begin with, a story that was published in Apex last year, and which I've never read anywhere. So this is kind of a Story Hour exclusive. It was read by a narrator at the time. And I'm so sorry, I'm getting over a bit of a cold, so if you could bear with me. This story is structured in chess moves from a real and famous game, but I will only be reading those until the point where things get a little messy, and then I'll stop reading those moves. But if you want to enjoy the full moves and play through the real game, you can actually do that by going to see it on the Apex website. So this is called the Immortal Game. Pawn to e4. On Thursday nights, the daisy slides into her favorite black dress, slightly flared with a pleated skirt, and unrolls her curlers, making sure her hair coils in tight waves, each the perfect size to slide onto a man's ring finger. Pawn to d4. She walks 5 blocks in high heels, taking her time, enjoying the night air, temperate, carrying the smell of hard-worked horses and the faintest hint of motor car fumes. Streetlights pull amber, paving the road to the club with golden bricks. Inside, it's a raucous blend of music and blue smoke as the jumping jazz band hit their stride. Sometimes the daisy spots a man. Sometimes the man spots her, eases his way through the crowd, putting his hands on the small of women's backs and the dinner-jacketed biceps of businessmen with combed, slick hair. Night to C3. She can tell from a man's shoes how fit he is, from a jacket, how rich, from a tie, how greedy. Bishop to E3. Again, she can tell so much by how he phrases the question. May I buy you a drink? A good kisser, albeit a little prim. Can I buy you a drink? A little rough around the edges, but not malicious. A drink for the lady, my good man, used to getting his way, one to be observed, to be monitored, in case the tides of his temper begin to crest. Queen to D2. He buys. She drinks. He buys. She drinks. Pawn to F3. Subtly, the daisy intimates that she's flattered to receive this unexpected male attention. Again, it's a careful negotiation, not a dance like other young ladies might think, but a chess match. One pawn lost may look like a mistake, but it's all part of a calculated strategy. Do you play chess, mister? She'll inquire. He'll say yes, regardless of whether he does or doesn't. Men live and breathe with the confidence that they know enough, in the presence of a woman, regardless of the truth. He might follow it with some self-deprecating remark, depending on whether or not he thinks he's a wit, but he will say yes. Knight to E2. She'll mention she has a board back at the hotel room, a travelling set given to her by a favourite uncle. Hotel, eh? He'll say, why, you're not from around here? No, sir, she'll reply. And then, depending on her mood, the man, and a dozen other small factors, she'll pick a state, a city, never a town, never somewhere small enough to be pinned down. And are you here long? Sometimes they ask because they're hoping, if she bids them good night like a good girl, that they might ask her out to dinner tomorrow. And sometimes they ask because a girl who lingers might cause trouble if discovered by a wife. Bishop to H6. If she were older or smarter, she would know better than to act this way. Scenting weakness, he moves in closer. When he offers to walk her back to her hotel room, she accepts gratefully. He waits until they've reached the shadowed alcove, no bellboy or doorman in sight, and she's staring up at him with wide, guileless eyes before swooping in for a kiss. He thinks he knows the hotel, has seen it before, perhaps on his walk to work. A decent building in a reasonable neighborhood, but a place where employees won't look too hard at the clientele, especially if there's a few extra bucks in it later. Somehow, he maneuvers an invite to walk her inside, right to her door. It's only polite, after all. It's what a true gentleman would do. Queen to H6. In the corridor, he'll note the pristine walls, the lack of burns on the cream carpet runner, or sticky patches on the wooden floorboards. The doors are all the same, painted a rich chocolate brown. Very few men, in their drunken, anticipatory haze, will notice that none of the doors are numbered. In fact, each door opens into a different city, a different time. The daisy may be here, in New York, but the rose is dancing in Chicago, while the poppy is lurking in an alleyway outside a Memphis nightclub, waiting for some unsuspecting dandy to offer to light his cigarette. Pawn to A3. I'd love to see this chessboard of yours, he says, and angles his body to enter. Coyly, she acquiesces. From hip height, the walls of the hotel room are covered with patterned wallpaper. Strange birds with long tails twist themselves into odd shapes against a beige background. From the border downwards, the wall is painted a pretty burgundy, the colour of a good Merlot, or perhaps blood beginning to dry. Castling the king. She'll pour him a drink from the minibar, the roles exchanged now in the comfort of assumed domesticity. The chessboard itself, already set up on a small table, is ornate, beautiful. Most of the black pieces are carved from a strange, lightweight material, fragile. One or two are like the white pieces, which are all carved from something solid and cold. He doesn't ask before he fingers them, stroking each piece, comparing it to the others. Marble? He'll ask. Marble, she'll confirm. And this? Bone, she'll smile. He'll smile too, until she realizes she isn't joking. Some men like it. Some men will want to ask questions, sensible questions, like whose bones, and why carve some pieces from bones and some from marble when marble would do for all. Even if he asks, she won't answer. Some people are made of marble, and some are made of bone. This is simply the way of the world. King to B2. The man will seat himself. If he knows chess at all, he'll pause, knowing that white goes first. If he's a gentleman or a smooth talker, he'll ask which she wants. Either way, he'll seat himself. If he sits down at white, when he next looks away, he'll find that the pieces have switched. He's just drunk enough to blink, stupidly. I wonder what just happened, but not sober enough to make a big deal out of it. One or two men might wave off that last drink, but she'll press it into their hands anyway. I made it just for you, she'll say. A special kind of way my mama taught me. This relaxes them. What could be more comforting than a mother's recipe? What else did your mama teach you? Some might add, grinning. Knight to C1. They'll play. She always loses the first game. In the early days, she'd always won the first game to make sure they had something to try for. They didn't like that. Some of them even became angry, but the room doesn't like angry men. It likes happy, dazed men. So now the Daisy always loses the first match. They get cocky after that. Depending on how long she thinks she needs to wear them down, she'll make a couple of obvious mistakes or help them along while making sure she looks for all the world as if she's struggling to decide which pieces to move next. Say, how about a little wager? They'll say eventually. She'll play dumb. Whatever do you mean, mister? If you win, I take off my shirt. If I win, you take off that dress. She'll blush and perform the usual fluttering, well, I really oughtn't do that, but perhaps just this once. After all, a girl needs a little adventure in her life before she settles down. Ain't that so? Knight to C3. You must have a suitor or two back home, surely, some will ask, watching her set up the board again. Depending on the man, she'll answer in one of three ways: yes, no, or nothing at all. Funny how she gathered all the pieces together, scooping them into the soft, pale palms of her hands, and yet the pieces are back in their rightful places in the blink of an eye. Regardless, the men will down what's left of their drink and sit forward, elbows balanced on their knees. The challenge is real now. Time to focus. Rook to D4. She loses the next match and shimmies out of her dress. He makes to stand up, but she motions him to sit down. You haven't won everything yet, sir. No? She'll look down at her undergarments, batting her eyelashes demurely. One more match, I should think. When they hesitate, torn between lust and the urge to compete, to show off, she'll add, besides, you're so good at this. Puffed up, the men cannot resist a final chance to demonstrate their skills. Love-making is a lot like chess, you know, several will announce. Oh, is that so? Wide, dark eyes, lips parted just a touch, the very tip of a white canine, surprisingly sharp, pressing into red flesh. They'll smile paternally. What could a young woman know of the world, lacking their experience, their vices, their manly adventures? How could they ever impart what it means to be a man, to embody all that is protective and noble? It is an impossible task, but nevertheless, they will try. Rook to D1. He talks. She listens. He brags. She listens. Pawn to D3. As he considers his next move, he realizes that the board has grown bigger. Perhaps he's drunker than he thought. Knight to A5. The world beyond his peripheral vision blurs. The wallpaper in the hotel room looks a lot like a chessboard now that he thinks about it. He thinks it was something else before, but can't remember precisely what. His thoughts are muddled, but never mind all that. A night of passion is at stake here. Why? What would he tell the boys at the club if he lost? No, no, it's out of the question. It's do or die. Bishop to H3. Did you know that the bishop's name isn't necessarily anything to do with the church? She says as he reaches for the piece. He hesitates, fingers hovering. What? See the slash in the tip? It was originally designed as a war elephant, and that slash represents the opening in its trunk. She's smiling, but in a way he's not sure he likes. Vulpine. Cunning. Is that so? Of course, it looks an awful lot like a bishop's hat, doesn't it? The French don't call it a bishop, though. He lifts the piece, moves it, captures a pawn. They call it un fou, she says. The fool. He looks down at the bishop. The slash in its tip opens into a mouth and whispers one word. Run. Queen to F4. When the men stand up, they often upset the board. This one is no exception. Stumbling backwards, while black and white pieces rain around his ankles, he trips over his chair or his own feet or something unseen snaking along the carpet. She's a queen, slender and white, a crown atop her blonde ringlets, and she rises to her feet and towers over him like a giant, stretching into the vast white sky of the ceiling. Rook to E1. Checkmate, she announces, and the unseen entity grips him by the ankles, tugs hard. He hits the floor with a thud that punches the air from his lungs in a way that reminds him of school bullies, of being kicked by an errant cow on the farm, of his first real fight with another man at college. Some have never been hit before, and it shows in their shock, their red mouths yawing open to wail a protest of injustice, as if there is anybody to hear them but the daisy, as if the very same thing is not happening down the hall in a dozen other rooms at this very moment. He's dragged against the wall, where the paper folds around him, beige and liquid like molten skin. On the opposite wall, a chessboard opens and closes, while red birds shriek and peck at his face. He flails, screaming, but there's nothing to hit. The harder he fights, the faster he sinks. She's setting up the board again, as if nothing is happening to him, and he calls out to her once, twice, before realizing that he doesn't know her name, has maybe never known her name. His pelvic girdle melts, allowing his thigh bones to connect directly to his spine. His arms pull in tight to his cracking rib cage, each thin bone snapping and reforming until they're nothing more than stubby wings, leaving a collared border around the single long fused bone of his body. Shrinking in a dwindling scream, purple shadows collapse into the stars behind what's left of his consciousness until he's nothing left but. A single piece drops to the floor, hitting the carpet with a muted thunk, barely more than a whisper. Queen to A7. Almost a whole collection now, she says, and picks him up. She settles him where he belongs on the board, a black rook made of bone, as light as the others, before sliding under the cool, crisp sheets. She needs a good night's sleep after all that exertion, and soon the daisy will be permitted to play for her own freedom. Thank you. I like that piece very much. It was such a blast to write. And I always like doing something in a weirdly structured way, and that's kind of the theme that I have going on tonight, because the second piece is much shorter, but it's also written in a very, very strange way. I was in a workshop which was run by Tommy Dean, and he asked us to do something quite strange, and I ended up writing what turns out to be quite a sad and horrible little story about a life in pieces of cake that were eaten. So similar vibes in a lot of ways, but much less chess in this one. And this one is called Cake by the Ocean. A cronut in New York. vaped cotton candy breath, ice clinking against a frosted glass, knee bones kissing under a small table, a connection spanning sorry, I have started in the completely wrong place. I'm reading this from a website. I'm going to start from the beginning. A piece of birthday cake in Dublin, a red party hat with a snapped elastic band, limp balloon rags with the number 5 printed on the plastic, a bountiful harvest of wrapping paper, 2 ants doubled over laughing, spilling fizzy drinks, a raspberry sorbet in Mallorca, chapped lips, heat shimmers on wavy pavements, thick smears of suntan lotion, a late curfew, a boy who smelled like the liquid mixture used to blow bubbles, the first grains of sexuality trickling downwards. A torn hunk of Victoria sponge on Blackpool Beach, following 2 hot chips and tomato ketchup, wind-blown hair, seagulls squalling, syncopated, over tinny fairground music, a group of teen friends already growing apart. Something chocolatey and unpronounceable in Normandy. Someone else's headphones, thudding like twin hearts. A girl with a thin eyebrow scar. A long train ride to an unfamiliar warm bed. A promise quickly broken. A cronut in New York. Vaped cotton candy breath. Ice clinking against a frosted glass. Knee bones kissing under a small table. A connection spanning distance and time. Familiar green needle perfume. Nervous-eyed newscasters reading headlines with placid lips. 2 frosted vanilla cupcakes in Shannon. A text received, "Babe, I miss you already." Fights in the bus depot. Broken glass underfoot, crunchy and pale as January frost. Streaks of dried brown blood on the linoleum floor. A text received, "I'm scared. Stay safe. I'm so scared. I wish you hadn't left. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Okay, always remember that I love you. I love you always forever. I swear I love, I love." Spiced gingerbread in Dublin city centre. Abandoned cars. Empty streets. A hammer hooked into a belt loop, just in case. A lack of cell phone signal. The weasel bite of panic, nipping constantly. Black Forest Gatto in a seaside cafe. Shop doors as wide open as coughing mouths. Occasional twisted bodies scuttling like crabs. No broadcasts on any TV or radio channels. A light, drizzling rain. A reason to use the hammer. Twice. 2 moldy shortbread fingers on a ferry. A crumpled map. A badly bandaged wound leaking relief. Calm green ocean on all sides. A pod of dolphins competing for most spectacular jump. A smile, almost. Stale scones in the Scottish Highlands. Fresh milk. A herd of deer more curious than afraid. Loneliness thicker than the down feather winter coat in the closet. A farmer's gun. Plenty of time to practice. Nothing left but memories. Thank you very much. Very different stories, but hopefully spooky vibes.
Yeah, that one was so sad. I don't think I've ever seen an apocalypse sketched quite like that.
Thank you.
Oh. Well, it is our way at Story Hour to take a moment after the first writer has read and just let the stories sink in so that we can be ready for more. Everyone, that was Lindz McLeod. Thank you. Our next reader tonight is Somto Ihezue. Somto Ihezue is a Nigerian Igbo writer, editor, and filmmaker. He is a creative writing MFA student at the University of Maryland and an alumnus of Clarion West, Tin House, Voodoo Knots, and Milford Science Fiction Workshops. He is a recipient of the Mandela Institute's AYNM Fiction Prize and the Horror Writers Association grant. His work was shortlisted for the British Fantasy Award, Sidney J. Bounds Awards, the NAMA Awards, the Afrotondo Short Story Prize, the Utopia Awards, and has equally been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and the British Science Fiction Award. His works have appeared or are forthcoming in Tor, Africa Risen, the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, Uncanny, Strange Horizons, Nightmare, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Fireside Magazine, Podcastle, Escape Pod, Poetry Magazine, Omenana Magazine, Flash Fiction Online, Flame Tree Press, Mother Sound, the Salutiverse Anthology, and others. He is the assistant editor of the Publishing Taught Me anthology from SIFWA and National Endowment for the Arts, and co-editor of the Will This Be a Problem anthology. Welcome to Story Hour, Somto. Please unmute yourself. We want to hear you.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
Glad to be here. It's our pleasure.
So I'll be reading from my short story, A Door, a Guide, an Anchor, published in Frivolous Comma. And it is a story about three sisters trying to raise their brother from the dead. So yeah, I'm going to start reading. A door, a guide, an anchor. Of a brother untethered, 10,000 at the stake. Of the living, the wavering, the gone. Of blood, veil, and not. Of a son born again. Ekwensu, century of souls, darkness and song. Come, let the door open. For the Ihezue sisters, their voices an echo through the burial grounds. The ritual was the only way. 2 days ago, their only brother, Agadi, sovereign of the blood throne of Umukegu, had died in his sleep. The sisters knew what was coming for them. 110 monarchs had ruled Umukegu, and only 3 had been women. Oluchi, the Moon Queen, went missing on the 6th day of her coronation. Njideka, the Unbowed, died in the Battle of Prophets, her spear plunged in the heart of the usurper, her firstborn son. Batina, graceful and kind, was beheaded for treason. The trial and beheading of a monarch by their council was something Ibiwari, youngest of the Ihezue sisters, was yet to comprehend. But there was more. The 3 sisters were witches born of kings. A witch king once sat on the blood throne, Dimpa. When the priestesses of Amadioha rebuked him for tainting the natural order with forbidden sorcery, and he set a pack of demon wolves on them, no one said a word. When he rained fire in the war of fate, scorching his enemies and half his own men in the carnage, the chiefs of Umukegu decided they had had enough. The blood throne was of bone, tears, and secrets. It was carved by the fallen, the ones who died screaming. The potency of its magic was unheard of. Witches, fragments of that same potency, found it impossible to resist the throne's might, its corruption. It latched onto them, festering, driving them mad. It took 25 spirit warriors to defeat Dimpa. It took their lives. The sisters could neither abdicate nor denounce their royal birthright. No one would believe them. History bore witness to the terror they could unleash. If they fled, they'd be hunted down like dogs and hanged. The sisters had believed their brother would sire children before his passing. They were wrong. Left with no choice, they sought to raise him from the dead. Are you insane? Hassa panicked when Ebiwari suggested it. Nothing good ever comes of necromancy. She let her voice whistle to a whisper, panic rising behind her eyes. In the shrine of remembrance where they stood, the clay monuments of their ancestors lined the walls. The mold of Chikoka, their great-great-uncle, was hidden away in the shadows, and for good reason. Enraged grief, he had pulled the strings of death and tore his daughter's spirit from the abyss. The ritual cost him 4 brothers. It cost all his power. But his suffering had only scarcely begun. Chikoka soon learned that the soul he had resurrected wasn't his child's, but a demon. And so he watched his daughter die again, the blade in his hand gleaming with her blood. Witches from time past went about it all wrong, Ibirari tried to explain. One can't just steal a soul from a Kwensu and not expect retribution. What are you implying? We make a trade up front. Why are we listening to her? Hassa turned to their older sister, Ugochi, who'd been silent throughout the exchange. She's always had these reckless, unnatural ideas since we were children. I don't see you offering any solutions. Eberari stood from where she sat. Hassa went quiet for a while, wiping the sweat that had started to collect on her forehead. Well, I was thinking. She walked up to Ugochi, taking their hands in hers. What if you changed back? What? It was Ibiwari. Listen, we are witches, but we are also women. We cannot pretend that doesn't make our situation more precarious. Hassa stole a deep, shaky breath. If she changed back, they will be more lenient with a witch king. How can you suggest that? Ibiwari shoved her out of the way, coming to stand between her sisters. She is next in line. Who do you think they behead first? Hassa began to pace the room. She couldn't control her fingers anymore. They shook with an odd tremble. We should have fled a long time ago, but you two wanted to stay and protect our dear precious brother. Protect the family legacy, she scoffed. And I stayed. I sacrificed everything. I stayed. Our parents were murdered. We weren't just going to abandon Agadi. Eberari let anger seep into her voice. And even if Ugochi decides to live a lie, it wouldn't change anything. Dimpa was a man, and still they executed him. But they were lenient. Hassa rushed forward, stressing her point. Regardless of his many atrocities, they afforded him grace until the end. A courtesy never extended to any queen, witch or otherwise. It won't be enough. You don't know that. You spend your days caged up in here, Ibirari gestured around, but I've been out there, listening. They hate our power above all else. We removed ourselves from the outside world for a reason. In here, they forgot our history and what we are capable of. But you, she pointed a quivering finger at Ibiwari, you impulsive little brats. You exposed us over and over again with your lust for adventure and power. You showed them our hand. What? The Abihibi storm, the market rain fires that killed a family, that was you. That was an accident. We do not have such luxuries. Hassa left her to face Ugochi. Sister, we are out of time. We can't keep our brother's body hidden for much longer. I can't. Ugochi spoke for the first time. I know this must be difficult for you, but no, I physically can't, she said, tightly hugging her arms. shielding herself. The skin weavers, I made certain it was permanent. Hassa took 2 small steps backward. We are finished. Not if we bring him back. Ugochi straightened up, joining Ebiwari. Feral and wide, Hassa's eyes darted from one sister to the other. In small bursts, she fell into a fit of wild laughter. Ugochi, your penchant for irrational decisions is starting to border on foolishness. First, it was the scandalous affair with that soldier, and now you've sided with this raging lunatic. Choose your words with caution. Ugochi came face to face with her. It was not a request. And how do you intend to raise him? Asa inched away from her sister's glare. We were never tutored in necromancy. Mama made certain of it. We should flee east and hope the Sun tribes take pity on us. Well, Ibirari locked her arms behind her. With our brother's waning health, I had a feeling we'd require drastic measures. And I've been preparing. Of course you have. Asa threw her hands up in disbelief and resignation. Can't you see she's teetering on the edge of madness and taking us with her? She grabbed Ugochi by the shoulders, shaking her, probably hoping to shake off whatever spell Ibiwari had over her. She will be our undoing. We are already undone. Ugochi discharged the entire royal household of their duties. When Agadi died, she had sent most of the attendants away in a bid to keep his death a secret. Now, they all had to leave. Necromancy rituals were famed for brutality. This one was bound to draw attention. After Ugochi sent off the kitchen staff, she headed to the garrisons to oversee the exit of the guards. She had to be there in person. The soldiers weren't the most compliant lot. Turning a corner, she crashed into a soldier, their leather outfit a dark contrast to the white fabric she was draped in. Ihezue, the man bowed and leaned to the ground. He stood, and his gaze held hers. Ugochi cleared her throat, fingers clasped in front of her. I was on my way to relieve your comrades of duty, she started. Our family would like to take this time to commune with the ancestors. They've all cleared out, the man replied. Your sister already sent word. Good, Ugochi said, but did not turn to leave. Neither did the soldier. They just stood there. I heard you'd returned from R&D Zogo. What's it been? 7 years? 7 years, 4 months, and 2 weeks. Oh, she swallowed. You look well. I guess the islands are as refreshing as they. You had your brother send me away. Ugochi's voice cut in her throat, her mouth bone dry. Canyon. This was the first time she was saying his name in years. On her lips, it was something made of dreams. I didn't mean to. Canyon, it's not something I can explain right now. Try. In his eyes was a resolve, an aching. Was it my family's affliction? The madness? No, that was all Ugochi gave. That day, you said you'd meet me by the Odala tree, and I waited for you, and you never came. Canyon adjusted the neck of his uniform. Canyon, please. And when the commanders dragged me away, when it dawned on me it was you who had me deployed, even then, everything about Canyon was beautiful. The words that found home on his voice, his skin, day surrendering to night. His eyes were silver coins in a storm, and his hair, wool and black fire. Did you think of me? Please stop. Tell me, tell me you didn't think of me, and I'll stop. Ugochi said nothing. I thought about you every day. Canyon reached for her cheek. Unsure, he drew back his hand. Things are different, especially now. Ugochi inhaled. I have dire responsibilities, and I am not the person I was back then. You mean back when we were sparring mates, and I let you win, let you touch me in all the warm places. He drew close to her, his breath finding hers, and Ugochi stiffened where she stood. When you said you loved me, we were stupid. Ugochi paused. Children. We were stupid children. Love me again. Canyon touched one of her fingers with one of his. I want you to love me again. Ugochi shifted back. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time, her eyes unblinking. I want to show you something, she finally said. He consented with a nod, and delicately, she brought her forehead to his. And he saw her. On the day he was taken away, she had thrown 4 clothes in a bundle and ran all the way to the seaside. And when her feet blistered, when her throat parched, she did not stop. And when she made it to the harbor and found his ship had long sailed, she ran on the waters till she could run no more. Ugochi, Canyon, words weren't what she needed. And they lingered like that, forehead on each other's, noses slightly brushing, their hearts a beat away. Sister, Iberi's voice came first, her figure taking form as she stepped out of the shadows. They both pulled away from each other. Canyon hurriedly bowed, and when he stood, he whispered, Find me tonight by the Udala tree. Promise me. Ugochi nodded, going to her sister. As they left, Ibiwari looked back at the soldier with an airy, pitiful look. Night fell, and once again the sisters gathered. Standing in the resting place of their ancestors, their brothers' cups laid on a slab, Ibiwari explained what needed to be done. Rather than tear the veil between the living and the dead, as most necromancers had done in the past, one of them had to become a door between both realms. A door, Hassa interrupted. Wouldn't that require said person to be dead? Well, half dead. That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. Let her finish, Ugochi hushed her. And through the door, one of them would cross and lead their brother's soul out of the abyss. The last of them had to stay and hold the spells in place. One door, one guide, one anchor. You said nothing about what we are offering in exchange, Hassa cut in. That comes last. Trust me. Hassa rolled her eyes, and it was agreed. Ugochi was to be the door, Ibiwari the guide, and Hassa would anchor the enchantments. First, Ugochi was chained to a pole. Fledging into a door was certain to open her up to malevolent spirits. The chains were spelled to null her powers and keep her contained. And under the glare of a full moon, the sisters, daughters of Iziahala, crafted the ritual. Of her brother untethered, 10,000 at the stake, of the living, the wavering, the gone, of blood, veil, and knot, of a son born again, Ekwensu, century of souls, darkness and song, come, let the door open. At that moment, Ugochi began to flicker in and out of existence, a foot in both realms, a door ajar. And for the exchange, Ebirare said, angst finding her voice. She pushed the stone cover off a grave pit and with great difficulty dragged out the body of a man, Kanyin. His limbs were bound. What is this? Ugochi charged towards them, but the chains clanged her back. Sister, wait. There is a reason I kept this from you. What is this? This soldier is his name is Kanyin. All right, Ebiwari attempted to calm her. Kanyin is a descendant of the immortal bloodline of Azuka, one of the last surviving few. What does that have to do with anything? I think you know the answer to that. Ebiwari was right. She knew. They all did. Ekwensu once walked amongst the living, wielding power beyond measure, leaving desolation in his wake. Then the Azokas rose against him. Defeating him in a battle that spanned decades, they cast him into the abyss for all eternity. A victory that had come at a price, their sanity. So you intend to sacrifice him to Ekwensu as a peace offering? Hassa chuckled, an angry and mocking chuckle. Unlike the immortal members of his clan, the one who actually took down Ekwensu, this one is just a man. Death will find him eventually. Listen, we are done listening to you. Hassa was furious. What do you think will happen when his madness-stricken family comes looking for him? They took down a god. Us, they will crush like ants. They won't come looking. Ugochi had figured it out. She's going to sacrifice them all. Through him. And their lineage. Ekwensu is vengeful. He will relish nothing more. Ebiwari was convincing, but Ugochi was unyielding. A linking death spell of that magnitude demands a lot of power. Power you do not possess, power non-existent in our realm. Well, good thing you're a door to another. A silence fell on the grounds, one pierced suddenly by the shriek of a crow. It was you. Gochi's voice was rain caught in a bottle. You had Kanyin redeployed, had him sent back here. You've planned this all along. Our brother's health had been deteriorating for years. I needed to be prepared for the inevitable. You don't think I know that? Ugochi tugged at her chains. Why do you think I had him sent away? Tears split and waded down her face, like a river escaping a dam. If the time ever came that they gathered for our heads, I knew he would leave me, and I knew it cost him his life. Ugochi swiped at the tears, but they came anyway. Sister, one name, she pleaded, turning to Hassa. Don't let her do this. We can't stop now, Ebiwari ran to Hassa. The ritual has already begun. We see it's the end, or we die for nothing. Hassa looked down at her fingers. She looked around at the littered bones of their ancestors, but she did not look at Ugochi. I am sorry. I am so sorry. No, please, no. Ebiwari walked back to where Kanyin lay sprawled. She sat on the floor, propping his head onto her lap. Slipping a dagger from her robes, she brought the cold steel to his neck. This one is of immortals, of love, of duty. Wait, no, please wait. Of fire and hail, of shrapnel and pillars. Ebiwari, stop this, please. Ekwensu, Biamewara. Kanyin woke, his eyes finding Ugochi, like they'd always done when they were children, when he'd find her even in the darkest places. Ugochi. Ebiwari slit his throat. The blood splashed across Ugochi's face, and she screamed and screamed and screamed, like it was the last thing she'd ever do. On the floor, Kanyin's blood pooled. Then it stilled, the widespread receding as lines of blood trailed up Ebiwari's body, seeping into her ears, her nose, and her eyes. And when the last drop escaped into her, Ebiwari let go of Canyon's draped cups. She staggered up, crimson dagger in one hand. What was that? The shin shook Hassa. There's no time to explain. Ebiwari was visibly ebbing away. I need something from you. If you intend to murder me, you'll find them harder to kill. Not today, Wannem. She smiled weakly, turning the blade's hilt to Hassa. What are you doing? To be a guide, to seal the bargain, I'd have to die by the hands of someone who loves me. Mother was always right. You are insane. All I need to do is walk out of the abyss with our brother, and we'll both be resurrected, Ebiwari assured her. This is untouched waters. If anything goes wrong, the consequences, we don't even know what they could be. Let's worry about that tomorrow. Ebiwari squeezed the dagger into Hassa's hand. And if it all goes wrong, at least you'll be rid of me. I hate you, Hassa said in between tears. So much. I know. And metal met flesh. Ebiwari gasped, staring down at where the blade pierced her heart. The wound leaked blood like crying eyes leaked tears. She slumped, and Hassa caught her, bringing her to rest in her bosom. And there they stayed. As the light left her eyes, the last thing Ebiwari heard was Ugochi's dying screams as the ritual overwhelmed her. Ebiwari found herself kneeling before Ekwensu. He was a boy, no older than 10. Whispers, she heard whispers, and there was a fog, like a damp, stifling sheet, a disconnection from you, from light, and in that whisper, in that fog, death sang. Souls infinite swam around the boy, an endless sea. Ebiwari Eziahala, you and your sisters have raised quite the dust. The boy leaned forward in his seat. It looked very much like the blood throne of a family. Dennis, something went wrong with your little sacrifice. The boy drummed his fingers on the armrest. When you eradicated the Yazuka lineage, their souls came to me, but not the power and madness they've amassed over centuries. No one knows where it went. And without it, I'm afraid this battle for your brother will not hold. Keep him. The boy arched a brow. What did you say? I said, keep him. Ebiwari stood. I'm here for something else. The spear of Obuchi, God Killer, the same one the Azokas had used in defeating Ekwensu, materialized in her hand. Interesting. The boy wasn't stirred, not a hair out of place. This is me claiming hell. Foolish girl, he giggled. I have lived 10 million lifetimes before the first of your accursed kind thought to breed. You cannot begin to fathom my might. Perhaps, she walked up, the spear's tip clawing the ground, igniting sparks. But the Azuka defeated you once, before. Now, all that they were resides in me. Ebiwari's pupils were the scarlet of Kanin's blood. You stole it, the boy's eyes narrowed. You are human. Your frail soul cannot wield such power. A wry grin crossed Ebiwari's face and nested. You cannot begin to fathom what my soul can wield. They stared each other down. A thing was certain. One of them would meet their end. Demons brewed from elemental darkness poured from around the boy and scattered at Ibiwari. Before they could skim a strand of her hair, she exhaled and they all collapsed to the dust. Then she made for the boy. She was upon him in a heartbeat. Grabbing him, he grabbed her back. In her grip, he shifted into a giant python, twice her size, and with a spiked tail, whipped her, sending her across the threshold into a wall. From the wreckage, Eberary pushed a boulder of herself to find the boy slithering up to her. You are a child, he hissed, tongue forked in three. Stretching open his mouth, he doused her in lava. When the steam cleared, when the lava cooled, Eberary stepped forth, unscathed. The boy reared his serpentine head back. It was like he'd spattered water on stone. Eberary rose into the air till she was at eye level with him. This time, when he lunged at her, fangs rattled. She slapped him into the ground. Coiled on the floor, the boy weakly writhed out of his python form. He made to stand, and Eberary descended from above, her foot finding his head, slamming it into the dirt. Centuries without a worthy adversary has made you weak, she said, raising her spear. Wait, wait. The boy was muffled. Debris stuffed into his face. If you kill me, a new cycle will begin. All who have died before this moment will be erased from this realm of existence. Your brother, your sister Ugochi, there will be no more. No resurrection, no reincarnation. They will fade into nothing. Ebiwari cocked her head. I feel like you've not been paying attention. She pulled back the braids that had fallen over her face, the way she always did when she needed to lecture Hassa. I have prepared for this day since I was 9. I murdered my parents for this. I cursed my brother with impotence, cursed him into an early grave. I betrayed my sisters for this. The blood of Dimpa courses through me. And now, she raised the spear once again. I will have dominion over death itself. The end.
Wow.
That was amazing.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Everyone, that was Somto Ihezue. We are trying to think of words besides wow, but we all seem to start out there.
Someone in the chat said epic, which I think is pretty accurate.
And yes, perhaps even technically accurate.
Exactly.
Yes. And intense also.
Yeah. And lovely. Just beautifully written and read.
Yes. Yes. I was switching back and forth because I loved hearing his voice and watching, but I also loved looking at the words.
Yeah.
What intriguing stories we've had tonight, Daniel.
I'm telling you, we are lucky.
We really are. And Spooky Month is off to a good start. Next week, our readers are Angel Lee McCoy and TJ Price. And we have a special guest host, PL McMillan. I do recommend checking storyhour2020.com the day of the reading for any announcements or any changes. And storyhour2020.com also has a nice little calendar so you can learn about upcoming authors in Spooky Month and beyond. And links to the recordings on Facebook so you can go and catch up on some story hours you may have missed, watch this one a few more times, maybe with the lights on. Lots of fun. Oh, Somto Ihezue, Lindz McLeod, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us tonight. Thank you to SIFWA for the Givers Fund grant that's helping us keep Story Hour rolling every week. And thank you to my co-host, Daniel Marcus, without whom literally none of us would be here tonight. Thank you, all of you watching tonight, all of you watching it sometime in the future, because as long as you enjoy these stories, we're all together in the same story hour. Good night.